I'm Mike Rowe, and you know what you're doing, right? You're listening to the Truck Show podcast. So congratulations.
Hey guys, that's right. You're listening to the Truck Show podcast with Holman, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 1. So I just want to wish everybody out there a very happy new year. There's so much going on and so much to talk about. I've been busy. I took a little bit of time off to get the show kind of swapped over so we can have a smooth transition into Season 3. And I know some of you have been online and social, and you've seen some of the fruits of that labor. So happy to say I think all the pieces are in place now. Should be regular going forward with our normal Monday drops as well as our Thursday drops. So figuring out a few little things, some tweaks here and there. But I wanted to fill you in. There is a lot to talk about. So the first thing I want to say is finally we're doing some video. So I made some investments into the podcast studio. One of those is a streaming camera, high res, so that I can record basically the interviews that we do. We can do them over Zoom now and record those and then put those up on video on the Truck Show Podcast YouTube page. So that's going to be the process going forward is we'll have our normal Monday drop, long form, Thursday short form, and then about a week later, the interview portion will be uploaded to YouTube. I've been working on that, so some new equipment, doing some video. Hopefully the majority of our interviews will be up on YouTube. So looking forward to that and seeing how that resonates with growing our audience with some new folks. Also, we just launched the Podshed Insiders group on Facebook. We have over 100 followers now. A lot of you guys found that on your own. And it's going to be the place to go to interact with the Truck Show podcast and myself. And why that's important is I want you guys to feel like the show's more engaging, more interactive. I want you to share some ideas with me. But I also plan on doing some more live shows with you guys. And so the word is going to go out through the Facebook group. So if you're on Facebook, join the Podshed Insiders. And that's where that info will come. What I'd like to do is, I know Lightning and I at the end of last season did a live show on Zoom, and I plan on doing that again with you guys, where we could have some fun. You can ask questions. Maybe we'll do some Know Your Notes together, and we'll just have a good time. And I'd like to do that maybe every other month or once a quarter. You know, give me that feedback. Would you guys be interested in having some live episodes of the Truck Show podcast more regularly? If that's the case, then we can definitely make that happen. But again, that's all going to come through the Podshed Insiders group on Facebook. You can still drop me an email, truckshowpodcast@gmail.com or holman@truckshowpodcast.com, and let me know what you think. I also have more great guests coming. I think we're filled up through February right now, or maybe through the beginning of March. So plenty of guests coming up, lots of great content. So you guys don't have to worry about that falling to the wayside or anything like that. So anyway, just lots of stuff going on. I definitely want to get to know you guys better and interact with you more and just have a great time doing it. Please keep in mind that the Truck Show podcast survives off of your reviews, both on Spotify and Apple, and by our sponsorships. So please help me to keep the Truck Show podcast free by leaving reviews and comments on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and also by supporting our sponsors. We've got some great new sponsors for 25. We'll be talking about that, at least one of them today coming up. And let's get into that. So the Truck Show podcast is presented by Nissan. And if you are looking for a new truck or a family hauler, then you'll want to head on down to your local Nissan dealership and put your eyes on the robust and reliable fresh and 25 Nissan Frontier, or the all-new luxurious and capable 25 Nissan Armada SUV. I've got one of those in the driveway right now, and it is absolutely one of the best full-size SUVs on the market. I'm not just saying that because Nissan supports the podcast. It is a phenomenal vehicle. I've got a Pro 4X. The craftsmanship, the quality, the interior, the ride, and that twin-turbo V6 with 516 pound-feet of torque, it's a beast. So either through the Nissan Frontier or the full-size Armada, get your legendary Nissan ruggedness along with all the features you're looking for in a new body-on-frame vehicle. Point your browser to nissanusa.com and see how Nissan has the perfect vehicle to fit your needs. Also, if you love your truck as much as we do, then why not give it the best synthetics money can buy? AMSOIL is not only the leader in synthetics, but also the first in synthetics. Started by fighter pilot Al Amatuzio in 1972, AMSOIL continues to innovate with a wide selection of synthetics. Available for just about any application, including automotive, power sports, industrial, racing, small engine, high mileage, and more. Whether you need oil, lube, grease, transmission fluid, car care products, or even filters and oil change kits, you can find everything you need at amsoil.com. And EGR USA is your one-stop shop for quality and well-thought-out truck accessories. For over 50 years, EGR has been the leader in truck accessories. Take, for example, the adventure-ready Roll Track tonneau cover. Designed to turn your truck bed into a secure and sealed space, the Roll Track gives you instant access to your truck bed by sliding out of the way. Available in power or manual models, the Roll Track also incorporates T-slots into the rails so that a variety of accessories like crossbars or bed racks can be attached to it. EGR's catalog also includes flares, LED lights, rain guards, bug deflectors, sports bars, and more. Head over to egrusa.com today to find out what accessories they have for your truck. And here's our latest sponsor of the Truck Show podcast, and that's Kershaw Knives. If you're a truck guy, then you're definitely a knife guy, and we want to extend to the Truck Show podcast listeners one of the best knife deals you're going to find. Thanks to our generous partnership with Kershaw Knives, the Truck Show podcast listeners can get 40% off MSRP and free shipping over $50 by using the code 25TSP40 at checkout. It can be used more than once and even includes automatics. All Kershaw knives, regardless of price point, come with a limited lifetime warranty, and repair parts such as pocket clips, screws, and springs are available through the website. Kershaw knives also include a lifetime sharpening, and the lineup has everything from EDC knives that can be used and abused for under $50 all the way up to high-end collectibles. Support the Truck Show podcast and get yourself a Kershaw knife today. And last but not least, OVR Magazine. When it comes to amazing adventure content, how-tos, and great storytelling, only one brand is doing it right in the print magazine space, and that's OVR, Outdoor Vehicle Recreation. OVR is about getting out there in your vehicle to explore and discover the world around you. Get complimentary access for a year to the digital library or a discount on a year print subscription today at OVRmag.com. Use the promotional code at Truck Show Podcast.
The Truck Show. We're gonna show you what we know. We're gonna answer what the truck, 'cause truck rhymes with the Truck Show. We have the lifted, we have the lowered, and everything in between. We'll talk about trucks that run on diesel, electricity, and on gasoline. The Truck Show, the Truck Show, the Truck Show. Whoa.
It's the Truck Show with your host, Holman.
That's right. It's me, Holman. And I recently had this incredible conversation with none other than Mike Rowe. I expected Mike to come on the show for about maybe 15 to 20 minutes to talk about the 62 Dodge Power Wagon build that's going to be auctioned coming up at Barrett-Jackson. And he ended up giving us over 75 minutes of really riveting conversation. We covered a range of topics. I'm still reeling from it. To be honest with you guys, Mike has always been my number one person I've wanted to get on the show. Didn't know what that opening was to get him here. When I saw at SEMA that he unveiled a truck that was going to be auctioned off for his Microworks Foundation, I thought, well, maybe that's an opportunity to get him on. He could not have been more gracious, and I'm really hoping that you guys are going to enjoy this interview, and you'll agree. You know, a lot of times they say, don't meet your heroes, right? Because it's usually a disappointment. I got to say, Mike is exactly the person that you would hope he would be, that he comes across on social and in interviews and on the TV and all that stuff. And really more than that, still just blown away that he was so gracious with his time. And I hope you'll agree. So here he is, none other than Mike Rowe.
Yo, the Truck Show! Who dis? Who dis? Who the hell is this? A Truck Show interview you don't want to miss. We talk to top dogs in the industry. How'd you blow up? How'd you come to be? Who dis? Who dis? Truck Show represent.
All right, so if the jingle did not scare you off, then we're in good company. I'm so excited to introduce our guest for our first show of Season 3 of the Truck Show podcast with Holman. Not only one of my absolute favorites, but I'm sure yours too. You know him as the voice of Deadliest Catch, the host of Dirty Jobs, and my favorite podcast, That's the Way I Heard It. He is a promoter of the blue-collar trades, and he's a small business owner, author, and singer. I'd like to introduce Mike Rowe.
Wow, no pressure, Sean. Thank you very much. What a privilege. Look, full disclosure, I'd have done your podcast one way or the other, but when I heard the jingle and when I learned that you are somehow inclined to pay some sort of musical homage, both to your audience, to your advertisers, whatever, I found incredible common ground and thought, well, I don't know if this guy's got a screw loose or
Yes.
not, but if he does, it's the same one I've been missing for a long time. So nice to meet you.
You know, what's funny is everybody always asks, who's the one person you'd want to have a beer with? And I always tell them it's Mike Rowe. So maybe not a beer, but I'm going to be gratuitous here and tell you that I would love to have some Noble whiskey with you sometime.
Well, Sean, it's not that complicated. I have a bottle with an arm's reach here that I break in case of emergencies. And we've had more than a few emergencies on my podcast. So look, if it comes down to it, just say when and we'll crack it open. It's early out here, but I'm game.
Yeah, if you're on the West Coast, I am too. And we could, I've got my shot glass over here. I mean, I don't mind cheersing you if maybe at the end of the show. How about that?
I got a cup of coffee and I'm not beyond turning it into some version of a bastardized Irish coffee right here on Zoom.
This is going to be great. This is going to be a great podcast. I do have to ask you how your parents, Peggy and John, are doing. So I follow your mom on social, and she is, I swear, a national treasure. She's an absolute delight, and she kind of feels like America's grandma in a way. She's witty, she's funny, she's fun, and I love following them. They are great people.
Well, you've said two things so far that are, in my top three, my whiskey and my mom. Noble Tennessee whiskey is named after her dad, Carl Noble, whose existence inspired the show Dirty Jobs and the foundation that I run today. But, it's really funny. I know we're going to talk about the trades and about work ethic and all that
Absolutely.
stuff. And my mom always gets short shrift. I talk about the hundreds of dirty jobbers that I've worked with, the fishermen of the Bering Sea, my pop, my granddad. But right in front of me my whole life is this woman who wrote every single day for 60 years, dreaming of getting a book deal, dreaming of being published, and never seeing those dreams come to fruition. She never quit writing, though, Sean. Every day she wrote hundreds of words. And it wasn't until she was 80 that her first book hit and went to number 4. And she's been writing bestsellers ever since. She'll be 87 in a week. And she's just, I don't know, man. In a world where people talk about second acts all the time, very few people actually get one. Peggy Rowe did.
She's amazing. And the closest that you have with your parents, and you can see the love that they have for each other and how playful they are in their posts. And you scroll through social, and a lot of it is just people feeding their own egos or saying what they need to do to get the paycheck or whatever. To run across something in your feed on a daily basis that's just genuine people, that's hard to beat. It's like I said, she's a pleasure and a delight and a national treasure, and I enjoy following her. I feel like like your mom's my grandma. I feel like I kind of know them in a weird way. Maybe I shouldn't, but I love it just the same.
Well, thanks. I'll tell her you said hello.
Please
It is
do.
funny, she's gotten a lot of press over the last 5-6 years. And I think it was Fox actually did a special on her called America's Grandmother. And it's so weird, man. I mean, the stuff she shares on social is all PG, sometimes PG-13, mostly G-rated stuff. But man, the stuff that she shares with me offline is just so, it's more like Betty White on a bender. That's my, it's like Betty White plus Irma Bombeck equals this woman who's now trying to make sense of social media and all the crazy headlines and all the trouble in the world from her retirement community on a laptop where she just sits and holds forth. It's awesome.
Oh man, I love to hear that. So you've got a lot going on. The reason we had you on is because at SEMA, you unveiled this truck that's going to Barrett-Jackson to support the foundation. So we'll get into that in a minute. And I had a conflict at SEMA. Otherwise, I was going to try and come see the unveiling and meet you there. And by the time I got there, you were gone. I was like, oh, man, I just missed Mike Rowe again. And I think my dad had even mentioned, oh, I heard Mike Rowe's at SEMA. It's like, I missed him. So,
Are you going to be at the auction?
You know what? Every once in a while, I talk to Craig, and he's invited me out, and I think I don't have a conflict, so I might reach out because I would be interested to go. It's quite the show.
It'll be my first one, and I'm totally pumped, and I can't wait to get there and let all the experience and knowledge wash over me.
Well, it's going to be awesome. Mike Rowe Works has been sort of your, I don't know. It's been your rod and your staff as you have. Let me put it this way. Here's what I love about Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe stands for something, but you don't just stand for something. There's a lot of celebrities out there. We all know they stand for something in the public. You stand for something that's not glamorous, that's not sexy, that is the common man. You're relatable. People like you because they understand who you are. And then you went and did a foundation to support all the things you said you believed in. And we all know that four-year university is not right for a lot of people. And I think we've shortchanged our youth. We've told them that they had to get a four-year degree. Sometimes they'll go out and get a degree in Byzantine basket weaving, and they have this fancy four-year degree, and it's like, well, there's no job that supports that. Or there's two jobs in the world. And then they go, well, now I'm going to go be a barista or something. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But they're not living up to the potential of all the money that they spent. They're not making anything that can pay back the student loans. Yet here we are in a renaissance of infrastructure improvement and construction and automotive and all these things, welding, pipe fitters, glass hangers, all of those things. And we don't have enough people for these high-paying jobs. Trade school is way more affordable, and you could immediately be making six figures. And people don't recognize that. And you've been, the one carrying that message forward for quite a while now.
Well, it's thank you, first of all. I'd love to take credit for being the guy you described from the jump, but my journey's been an evolution as well. I've learned a lot of things over the years working on the shows that I work on, namely that I was wrong about a lot of stuff and that I had become disconnected fundamentally from a lot of things that I grew up with. I was very fortunate. I grew up next to the aforementioned Carl Noble, who only went to the 7th grade, but my granddad could put a house up without a blueprint. He was a tradesman's tradesman with the kind of work ethic that I just kind of assumed everybody had because I had a front row seat to it on, our little farm. But he was unusual. And Dirty Jobs was a tribute to him. And later the foundation was as well. Because, I went to a community college, then I went to a university, but my education, Sean, didn't really start until episode 1 of Dirty Jobs. And it was a long process of getting reconnected to some pretty basic things, like where my food comes from and where my energy comes from and the people who provide it and the wisdom that's often overlooked, but inevitably found, baked into those people. Nobody wants a lecture or a sermon. So Dirty Jobs, first and foremost, was an entertainment proposition, but there was some meat on the bone. It was more than just exploding toilets and misadventures in animal husbandry. Over time, people began to see it for what it was, which was a talk show in a sewer and a love letter to men and women who had the qualities that my pop had, And so, yeah, it was a privilege at 42, right? I was 42 years old when I sold that show, and I had done okay in entertainment prior to that, but I hadn't done anything that would give me the bona fides or the permission to weigh in on vocational education or CTE or a crumbling infrastructure or a widening skills gap or any of the things that you just alluded to. Dirty Jobs gave me permission to do all that over the last 20 years. And the foundation, it's nice of you to suggest it was my rod and my staff and sort of the center of my thing. But that didn't happen until I'm not even sure when it happened, man, to be honest. I do a lot of different things. And sometime in the last 5 or 6 years, I remember waking up and thinking, son of a bitch, man, this foundation has become the sun in my solar system. And the other things that I'm involved in, I'm still very passionate about, but they're just planets and asteroids and comets and things that come and go and spin around. The foundation has become central to what we're doing. And while I'd love to take credit for it, it really has more to do with the fact that the headlines finally caught up to my smack. And I've been saying the same basic thing since Labor Day of 2008 when I launched this thing. We have to do something to reinvigorate the trades. We have to make a more persuasive case for the now 8.9 million jobs that exist that don't require a four-year degree. We got to do something about $1.7 trillion in student loans that's sitting out there, held largely by men and women. 50% of them, by the way, dropped out of college before they even got their degree.
Yeah.
So they've got debt without a piece of paper. And the ones who got their paper, by and large, aren't working in the field that they majored in. And so we've got so many disconnects in that space. And sorry for the filibuster, but
No.
that's the reality of it. The headlines caught up to my thing. And, to be able to talk about work ethic now and to be involved in projects like this and bounce around the country on podcasts and give speeches and, hopefully not annoy people, that's a privilege. I take it seriously.
I think with Dirty Jobs, so many of my peers watched that show. We watched it with our family. You started getting away from, family sitcoms in the 80s where you would sit down on a Friday night or a Thursday night. Everybody would be around the TV and would watch, any of the great 80s sitcoms. And you started getting to this reality television, right? And reality television was so self-centered. It was interesting to be a voyeur and to see what these people were doing. But it wasn't really family-centric. It wasn't really, you were almost eavesdropping in on the misadventures of somebody, but there wasn't any quality behind it. There wasn't any heft behind it. When Dirty Jobs came out, I think I want to say, and I may be wrong, but I think I even introduced my dad to it. I'm like, you got to watch this show with this guy who's like in the sewers. I remember sitting there watching it with my mom and dad, going over their house and watching Dirty Jobs and being absolutely as disgusted as I was intrigued by the message, right? There's rats rolling around the sewer, but all of a sudden you highlighted all these amazing jobs where I've got a 17-year-old daughter. She's a senior in high school, and we've been going through the conversation of, what do you want to do with your life? Where do you want to go? What kind of degree do you want to get? And she's like, well, Dad, I really want X, Y, Z. Okay, but what's the job that comes out of that? Well, part of me asking that question is following you for so many years and recognizing that a lot of the things people get majors for are great for a minor. But if there's not a job to catch them at the end, to make something of themselves, it's wasted effort. So I challenged her to figure out, what is the job that you want? Let's figure that out and then back into the degree or back into the program that you want. But let's figure out what you want to do next. And if you're not ready, community college is a great place to learn while we get there. And I go full circle with the Dirty Jobs because it became such a thing. All of my friends talked about it. I watched it with my family. It brought a spotlight to people you didn't even know existed in the world. You had no idea what happens after you flush the toilet, for example, right? I mean, you have no idea what skills are out there. You don't know how the guy services the big wind turbine or whatever. To your point, the husbandry aspect of being on a farm. And all of a sudden it gets people thinking like, wow, I've never looked at the world through that lens before. I've only looked at the world through a comfortable consumer. But if those people disappeared, what would life be like? And all of a sudden, that question gets answered when before, I don't think anyone had thought of it previously.
Well, look, there are no new ideas. It's a wheel, and everything old is new again. And all of a sudden, something kind of starts to feel relevant. For me, I was 42 and realizing how disconnected I had become from some of the essential things. So I just assumed that I wasn't alone. I mean, I grew up on a small farm. I grew up surrounded by skilled tradespeople and hardworking relations. If I could become disconnected from those things, well, then surely a kid from the city or anybody else, could find themselves in the same position. And on that score, I was right. Our country has become profoundly disconnected. And you don't have to go into an artificial insemination story or like show you something like truly spectacular and viral to make the point. You could just open the hood on any late model car. and challenge the average person who used to change their own oil or do their own brakes, like me. Challenge them to do that today. They can't. They've through no real fault of anyone's.
Totally agree with that.
It's just that we've become a very codified, specialized society, and we've made it really easy for most people to not have any real relationship to the business of laying their own pipe, or running their own HVAC, or their own plumbing. It's anything. You just go down a long, long list, and so that theme in that reality world was ripe. And I should point out too, if you're talking about the early days of Deadliest Catch and Dirty Jobs, there was a brief shining moment when reality meant precisely what the word is, and I got super lucky to be able to persuade the Discovery Channel to let me function in a way that wasn't a host or an expert, which up until that point really was the model. That's the trope, right? To go on the air as an apprentice or a guest or a cipher or an avatar, and let the actual mechanic or the actual sewer inspector or the actual wind turbine technician, let them be the expert, and let me become a spare set of hands experiencing that job for the first time. That felt really new to a lot of people, including, it sounds like, maybe you and your old man, but years before George Plimpton was doing that. I mean, it's not a totally original idea to get out of your comfort zone and let the viewer see you take a pie in the face. We just hadn't done it on TV in a generation or so. And so when Dirty Jobs came along, that felt new. And the other thing I'll just share real quick is that it was an honest show. We didn't do a lot of pre-production. We did no casting. There were no scripts, certainly. But most importantly, there was no second take. What you saw was the day that I experienced. 350 different times.
I still remember the animal sanctuary with the monkeys attacking you guys.
Yeah.
Oh man,
what a story that is. I won't tell you the whole story, but I'll tell you the lesson, man.
Yeah.
That we were shooting Shark Week. I was hosting Shark Week that year. I think it was 2006, and I was down in Cape Town, and the network had sent me down there for 3.5 weeks to a month to get a ton of very sharky footage, which is catch as catch can, right? You never know about the weather, and you just don't know how much time you're going to take. The weather was perfect. The sharks were everywhere. We got footage that you just couldn't believe it, in less than 3 days. So I'm down there with my crew, basically with 2.5 weeks to screw off. And we did for part of the time, but then we felt guilty and started looking for dirty jobs we could do outside of Shark Week.
Yeah.
And wound up in KwaZulu Natal, east of Durban, a few hours in the bush at a monkey rehabilitation facility. Now, if you're me and you read about a woman who's involved in monkey rehab,
you have to go.
You're hooked.
You have to go.
We didn't know that Dawn McGowan was half a bubble
crazy.
Off plum.
Yeah.
Her whole house was overrun with vervet monkeys that she was coaxing back to health. And within moments, I was bleeding from a face wound. One of my camera people was bleeding from a head wound, and my audio guy had been bitten through his calf right to his bone and was bleeding horribly. And we were trapped. We couldn't get out. And our only saving grace was we all had cameras. So we all just started filming this whole show. We just like whatever. And when we left, I remember Barsky was so discouraged, my field producer. He was like, Mike, I'm sorry. I don't think we have a segment here. We weren't able to shoot anything. But I said, man, you're probably right. We don't have a segment, but we might have a whole hour if the network lets us show what we saw.
Watching that, and it was the most disjointed edit you could tell but it was real. You could tell how frantic. I think if I remember correctly, you could hear like the monkeys running on the roof in the room that you were in, and you were trying to get. And I'm sitting there and going, "This is the most real thing I've seen on television in who knows how long." And
I asked this woman if she had any kind of painkiller or medication because my audio guy was in agony. I mean, we couldn't stitch him up out there. I taped him up as best I could, but it was a bad wound. And she leaves and she comes back with a box of wine.
Okay.
So we just started drinking wine out of boxes.
Why not?
As we were documenting what I really felt could be the end of everything. It was a monkey Armageddon. And that thing went on the air. And two things happened. First of all, I was vindicated for my position on no second takes. And I was doubly vindicated for insisting that the crew be included in the making of the show. Because up until then, you didn't see that on cable. But look, shooting dirty jobs was a dirty job. And getting those guys involved and letting the viewer really see the sausage made. You know, you probably hear people talk about breaking the fourth wall.
Yes.
Well, we didn't break the fourth wall. We just ignored it. You know, because if you break that wall, that is as intentional a thing as not breaking the wall. And the whole point was, what if we don't have camera A or camera B? What if we don't have the normal hierarchy of TV? What if we have camera A and camera 1? Or better yet, what if everybody is a behind-the-scenes camera? And everybody has permission to roll on, you know, the stuff that you would normally never, ever point your camera at. That's what we started doing. And once that happened, it was the monkey episode that pushed that over the top. And that's when the network just started ordering dozens at a time. And I realized,
awesome.
I'm going to do this for the rest of my life.
You know, the other thing about the reality is, you know, toward the end of the first stint, just you could tell the frustration that you're running out of jobs to do. You wanted to keep the show going, but it was like, guys, we need to find stuff. And I think that actually opened the door to people who never thought they would have had an audience with you to say, well, what the hell? I'll throw something in there, and if they want to come out, they want to come out, which I think led to a different set of jobs that maybe if you were busy, you wouldn't have otherwise engaged with. Again, going into the common man's realm, right? It wasn't as obvious as I'm in the sewer with rats, you know, doing wastewater processing. It was other things. How do you clear out a cement mixer, or, you know, just all sorts of other stuff?
That's a good one. That's worth its own tangent. But I think what you're getting at, in part anyway, is you have to let go of virtually everything to wind up in a show like this. I had to let go of everything I thought I knew about hosting and just become a totally different trope. The producers had to give up everything they knew about producing because we broke every rule. You know, putting the crew in the show, letting the viewer see all your tricks.
Us knowing Barsky's name and getting to have a relationship with your crew is something that was unheard of in television, ever.
Verboten. It's like, you're going to give away the magic. You're going to give away all our secrets. So I had to let go of my ego, which was not a small thing at the time. Production had to let go of theirs. The network had to be willing to put this whole thing on the air, and that was very tough for Discovery. Dirty Jobs was considered wildly off-brand when it premiered. But we also had to let go of everything we thought we knew about programming. And this is really interesting. I know you did your time at Motor Trend and understand basic media and the importance of, basically what we're paid to do is execute a plan, whether it's through an article or a build or a TV show or whatever. But what if there is no plan? You know, that means everybody has to let go of everything, including the whole notion of what the next episode will be. And toward that end, after I did the first season, which mostly was ideas that I had and ideas that Barsky and the production company had, we turned the whole thing over to the viewer. All the ideas after that came from fans of the show. And that's why I think, you and your dad and so many other countless family members are now introducing the show to a next generation, because whether you knew it or not, that level of authenticity is right there. I would read letters on the air all the time, real letters from people who invited me to come make blueberry pies up in wherever, someplace outside of Boston, because it's a dirty job. And these old ladies are like, how else would a producer ever know?
You wouldn't.
You wouldn't.
No.
And so the point is, Dirty Jobs didn't have a real host, didn't have a real production company. It was programmed by the viewers, and it was ultimately aired by a network who didn't want it because for the first season, they thought it was off-brand. And how weird today that 38, 39 shows have evolved from that exact show, a show that was once shelved because it just wasn't what Discovery was.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Going back to talking about not having those what I guess they would call the hard skills, right? Learning how to work with your hands. My Uncle Tom, he's a Korean War vet, owns some property not too far from here. I'm in Southern California. They've got some property out in this little town of Anza, which is about an hour and a half east of Temecula. So it's got 55 acres out there. It's kind of our refuge. They live in the city, but that's where they go once a month, just hang out. And I've been going up there since I was a kid. I learned, one day I went out there and he used to teach welding, and he goes, "What do you want to do today?" I'm like, "I don't know." He goes, "You want to weld?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, I want to weld." So he brings over a 15-inch steel wheel that he bought at a yard sale and a box full of horseshoes. And he goes, we're gonna build a hose bib today. So I want you to weld all these horseshoes. So he gets me all set up. And I'm used to like the MIG welders and the auto wire feeds, and he gives me a stick, hooks it up to an old diesel-powered miller, and he goes, "All right, have at it." So he teaches me. I did one, and I start welding. He comes back every few minutes, looks at it, pulls out a ball peen hammer, smashes the first one off, knocks the next one off. Now he goes, "Well, this one's too cold. This one doesn't have enough penetration. This one isn't this. This one isn't that." And as he's going around the ring of horseshoes that are going to hold the hose to this wheel, now instead of falling off, it's like at a 45-degree angle. Now it's at like a 60-degree. And then he goes, "Redo those, but you're getting better as you go around." But those little lessons of how to work with your hands, how to fix something. We've poured concrete slabs out there. We've done, a miserable job because it was hot and the mix wasn't right. And we're like, it is what it is. I remember one day, I went up there and he's got this really cool Kubota 4-wheel drive tractor with a scraper box on the back. And he goes, "You ready to have some fun?" I'm like, "I'm always ready to have fun." He goes, "You want to drive the tractor?" Hell yes, I want to drive the tractor. So he goes, "I need you to go grade these roads." So, some monsoonal flows came through and messed up his roads. He's up on a hill. So I spent the afternoon taking the scraper box and grading it and learning how to, get it just high enough where you can do the fill on it and not scrape all the road downhill and all that. And I would see him in his little Honda Pioneer, and he would be up on the hill and he'd be watching me, and then he would disappear. And I would work for a little while longer and I'd see him down at the bottom of the hill. He'd be watching me and then he'd disappear. And I was just waiting. So I get down to the bottom of the hill where there's curve, and he's sitting there waiting for me. He goes, "How long you been doing this for?" I said, "Well, I was today years old when I learned how to do this." And he looks, he goes, "Pretty good job." And he's not a guy who's going to just throw out praise. And I was like, "Yeah, I got it. You did a good job on the tractor for your first time." He goes, "Almost as good as me." I was like, "Yes." So those are those little moments in life where somebody who's a mentor to you or somebody that you respect is going to take time out of their day to involve you or teach you a skill you wouldn't otherwise have. And when you're done with that, them coming and affirming that you did it the right way, and it's somebody that you love, you respect, you look up to, there is no greater personal happiness than to have that. And I think we have lost a little bit of, that self-respect or pride in self in the current generation. And I think what you're doing
so, yeah.
with your foundation and bringing that spotlight is you're reminding people that pride in self and a job well done is worth almost any other kind of accolade or views on social or thumbs up. That one-on-one time of you walking away and go, I made him proud, is 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times more meaningful than anything that happens in the daily basis of like the modern life, I would say.
Funny how, I mean, when that happened to you, I'm sure it felt good in the moment, but you had no idea that decades later you'd be looking back at that.
Sure.
Telling me that story
Mm-hmm.
and a bunch of people who you've never met who are listening. That's powerful, and it's also universal. And I don't know your audience, but I'd wager that most of them right now are probably thinking about a similar moment from their youth when somebody came along, maybe their pop, maybe a dad, maybe a neighbor, maybe a foreman, maybe a friend, whoever, and just said, no, not that way, this way, or try it like this. And then, those are the moments when somebody takes you by the scruff of the neck and just makes an adjustment and sends you down a path you would have otherwise not taken. And then, of course, way leads on to way. And the next thing you're at a Motor Trend sitting here doing a podcast that you now own the rights to, talking to me, and who knows why and how. And it really is a sliding doors kind of world. And, in my view, even more so in the skilled trades, because in the skilled trades, way really does lead on to way in a super tangible way. Like my foundation has helped people who had a similar experience to yours and had the welding switch turned on and wanted to learn more. So we pay for their certifications, and then they get out in the world and they start welding. Now, some of them are still welding. Some of them have gone on to underwater weld and make a few $100,000 a year. That's a whole different animal. But others, the ones I find the most interesting, hired a few buddies, bought some vans, hired a HVAC guy and maybe a plumber, and then maybe an electrician. And now they got a mechanical service contracting company, and they're doing $3 or $4 million a year 6 years later. When you start to hear stories like that, you realize, man, there is no such thing as a small moment when it comes to introducing somebody to the joy of work or to the possibility of mastering a trade that they didn't even know they gave a damn about. That's really powerful, and I think you said earlier, there's nothing wrong with being a barista and Byzantine basket weaving and so forth and so on. You're right. There is nothing wrong with those things. What's wrong, what's busted, is the idea that the best path for the most people has to be the most expensive path.
Yeah.
What's mangled up in all of this is our addiction to cookie cutter advice. And, for every welder who's out there that wants his son or daughter to follow in his footsteps, there's another one who doesn't. They want something different, right? And so we put our thumb on the scale in 1,000 different ways, and we promote this trade at the expense of that one, or maybe this form of education at the expense of the other. And when I listen to you talk, and from a lot of people I met on the shows I work on, the thing that always happens that leads to this disconnect we were talking about is the removal of art from the conversation. Now, you might call it craftsmanship.
Sure.
In your world. It's got a lot of different names, but because we're so enamored of cookie cutter advice, we tend to put blue collar here and white collar there. And we tend to associate art with certain literal pursuits, like painting, maybe, and really not much else. And so we kind of arbitraged art out of the skilled trades, and the same way we got shop class out of high schools. And so it's always surprising today to find somebody who's working in the trades as a true artist. And that's a theme I come back to a lot, because once upon a time, before it was shop class and before it was Votech, it was called the vocational arts.
Yes.
And the war on work and this assault on the trades that has led to this massive skills gap, in my view, really started when we took the art out of the conversation and getting it back, highlighting. Again, it's not just exploding toilets on dirty jobs. It's not just misadventures in animal husbandry. We spent a lot of time with people who built the facades of buildings and approached it like an artist. I met guys in the concrete trade who really thought about concrete as their medium, in the same way.
Absolutely.
Bob Ross thought about watercolors.
Yep, and happy little trees.
That's it. Make no mistake, that dude was a tradesman as much as he was an artist.
I would be remiss if I didn't shout out my late automotive shop teacher, Mr. Sprang, Huntington Beach High School. He was the automotive shop teacher there for something like 30 years and became one of my first mentors. Did ROP through there, was his assistant, and learned a lot. And we became friends. He passed away a few years ago from cancer, but he was somebody who wasn't afraid to tell the kids you can make a living working with your hands and standing behind that. And we had so many great experiences in there. He came to class every day in a shop shirt and, shop pants or shop shorts with his work boots. And not only was he a very kind man, but he was holding the line, if you will, for the big fight to keep. Let me tell you this. Okay, so at the time, they were starting to cut funding, and this is back in the mid-'90s. And the vocational education classes were going away. So the back of where Auto Shop was a World War II Quonset hut kind of building at the back of the campus. And it had this closet off to the side that was probably 6 feet deep by 20 feet long. And it was just like a storage closet with a door. Well, he realized that if he sold snacks and sodas out of that closet, he would be able to self-fund what he needed for the program to lower his budget and keep it going. The school district found out about it, completely flipped out because the commissary side was going, you're taking revenue from our mouths. So they came to do an inspection because they had heard rumors that he had a vending machine and all this candy and food that the kids were buying. Well, Mr. Sprang put one of those big flame cabinets on wheels. And we had the vending machines that he bought secondhand in this side room. And the flame cabinet on wheels was like a false bookcase. And it would only roll to reveal the door for a certain moment, and then it was rolled right on back. So when the school district came to investigate these concerns from the commissary side, that a rogue teacher was selling sodas and candy on campus, they had no evidence of it because he was smart enough to hide it behind a flame cabinet on wheels that we put together in that class. And that's one of those little stories that will always stick with me because the ingenuity and the sort of like the best way to beat the man sometimes is to ignore the man and do your own thing anyway.
Look, this is why ultimately people don't really look back and remember the school with the level of fondness you would assume when people talk about their alma mater and all the fundraising things and this school versus that school, whatever. In the end, it's the teacher.
Yeah.
And your guy, what was his name? Sprang?
Sprang. Dave Sprang.
Sprang?
You got it. Yep.
Well, my Mr. Sprang was a guy called Fred King. And he didn't run a shop class. He ran a music class. And Fred, by the time I met him, it was his first year at Overly Senior High, 1977. It was my first year there, too. And, I was just getting up to speed with the fact that I wasn't going to be able to follow in my grandfather's footsteps. I did not get the magical handy gene. What came naturally to Carl Noble did not come easily to me. And I had worked, most of my teenage life as his apprentice, slowly learning that just because you love something doesn't mean you can't suck at it. And so, I learned when I was about 16 that I was not going to work in the trades the way I always thought that I would. And it was Fred King, whose sheer love of music and power of personality. He was Mr. Holland, like in Mr. Holland's Opus, he absolutely opened my eyes to a world that I really didn't know existed. And it's funny, you started playing your jingle. I started writing jingles with Fred King. He put me in a barbershop quartet when I was in the 11th grade. He cured my stutter by making me audition for a play. He pushed me so hard and so far out of my comfort zone. I scarcely knew how to behave, but he also showed me that I had some tools in my box that I didn't know I had. And so, yeah, I didn't really know it at the time. But when I look back, that was Dave Sprang. That was a guy who just said, no. My pop said it even better. He said, look, Mike, you can be a tradesman. Just get a different toolbox. And he was so right. I thought I was enamored of his ability to build and fabricate. And I was. But what I was really enamored of was this idea of jobbers and project-based work where you have a beginning and a middle and an end. And you always know how you're doing because you're always up to your elbows in a thing. Well, making TV is like that, And so I've always tried to think like a tradesman, even though I'm not in a traditional trade. And we could talk for hours about, the drama and the headaches that Fred King caused his superiors by doing exactly what Dave Sprang did, by coloring way outside of the lines and challenging kids to do things that they otherwise wouldn't. That stuff is irreplaceable and critical. And man, I worry that there's just not enough teachers out there today with that mentality.
And I'll tell you, we have this really, really great audience. People have been following this show for almost 7 years. And we've got a couple of shop teachers, and they will send me emails from time to time talking about their shop and how maybe they've played the podcast in the shop in the background, or how the podcast has been inspiring to some of their students. When I started this, I did not ever think we would do something that would affect people's lives at all. And I've told this story before, so forgive me, my audience, for hearing it. But there was a guy who emailed me, and he said, "My dad and I have been listening to your podcast, and we started working on our 6772, I think it was, Chevy C10 project. We had a falling out years ago. We haven't spoken in years, but the podcast got us together, and we've been working on this truck." He goes, "My dad just died of cancer, and I never would have had that time with him had we not bonded over the podcast." That's not why I did this. I did this because I wanted to talk about trucks, and I hope people wanted to hear what I had to say. To have people reach out, the shop teacher, an average Joe, and say that what I'm doing, that's my passion, somehow affected their life in some way that I would never had ever imagined or had the foresight to even see. It makes me want to keep doing it because it's bigger than me and it helps people. And to me, that is the best praise that anyone could give me, is that something I did made their life a little bit better or inspired them in a small way. And I hope people are listening to this conversation. They're feeling that inspiration as well, because this has been great so far.
Well, look, man, there was a time when I was doing dirty jobs because I consciously wanted to pay a tribute to my pop. And then there was a time where I was consciously doing it because I wanted to make as much money as I could and save it, because I had never made money before, and I was starting to like it, and then later, while I was still working on the show, I started getting pictures of kids dressed as me for Halloween. And I started running in at events to families with a grandfather there who had flown a bomber in the Second World War and a great grandson who watched Dirty Jobs together. And when you start to hear those stories and when you start to realize that whatever it is you're doing, whether you build trucks or buildings or do podcasts or TV or write books, whatever, people are often coy about it. They're like, oh, yeah, that's nice. It's always nice to hear from fans. Well, yeah, it's nice to hear from fans, but it's shockingly important and moving to hear from people whose lives were changed because of something you did or said in the course of making a living. That's bonus material.
Yeah.
That is actually the whole point. Most of us just don't realize it until later. But that's the thing you get addicted to. I'll never forget. I was working on a set doing something totally unrelated for Caterpillar. We were filming this little side thing called Lessons from the Dirt. And we had some time left over. It was like this fake little janky talk show we were doing. And I invited members of the crew to come in and sit down. And I started interviewing the crew because in TV, you'd be amazed. These people lead some pretty interesting lives. And I started talking to a guy a couple of years younger than me who got really emotional. And he was telling me the same story that you told about his dad and how they had become estranged and how during the last year of their life, they reconciled over Dirty Jobs. And he would go to hospice and he would sit with his dad and they would watch my show together. Now, as he's telling me this story, Sean, his lips quivering a little and his eyes are glassy. And he's getting me too, because it's very personal. And we've got 4 cameras pointed at us and he's telling us this story. And then he paid me this incredible compliment. He says, my dad, who was kind of a tough guy, always said to me, that guy right there, he's the only one that I give a damn about who's making television right now. I like that guy. I wish I could meet him before I died. And the guy, I'm just sitting there listening. And what do you say to that? So what I said was at the end, I said, I assume your dad has passed. He goes, yeah, I lost him 2 years ago. And I said, what was his name? He said, Ernest. And I said, what's your last name again? He says, Borgnine. Are you telling me your dad was Ernest Borgnine? Are you telling me your dad was McHale in McHale's Navy? The brawler in that great movie with, was it James Coburn, I think, where they fight on the train? Your dad was Ernest Borgnine?
Wow.
He goes, yeah. Yeah, man. And he loved your show. And I was done, dude. I was.
Don't forget Airwolf.
Ernest Borgnine was everywhere.
He was.
Look, I'm older than I've ever been, right? I'm 62. I don't know how many people in your audience remember Ernest Borgnine, but if you grew up in the same, he was everywhere. Just a man's man. And to think that all those years later, you're doing something on TV that he's watching.
When you grew up watching him, right?
It's mind-boggling.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time, so I want to talk about the truck. And it's funny. So we have this jingle that we put together years ago called Shop Talk. So I'm going to play it because it's a barbershop quartet, and I thought this would be hilarious. Hopefully Mike gets a kick out of it. So we'll get into the truck here.
What's in the shop? What's in the shop? Tell us what's in your shop. A segment where handsome guys talk about your build. A crazy consumption that'll keep the whole thrill. What did you make? Why is it cool? We all want to know. And now it's time for some shop talk.
That is just terrible. I love it.
It's horrible. So my former co-host, Jay Lightning Tillis, he worked at K-Rock for 26 to 30 years, I remember, something like that. We'd been friends. We started the show together years ago. And so the idea was with this podcast is we wanted to have it more like a morning show. So DJ Omar Khan from K-Rock and Jay did our audio imaging, and we set it up with segments and goofy jingles. We have dozens of them. And we found out that people started replacing their terrestrial radio and morning shows with our stupid podcast. And they were like, I love listening. I mean, our intro's horrible. And they're like, I get this email from this guy's wife, and she said, I have to tell you, I hate your show. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's a great way to start a letter. And she goes, my husband and I did this trip to Alaska, and he kept humming this stupid jingle. And I'm like, what are you humming? And he's like, the Truck Show podcast intro. And so basically, she said that he played some episodes, and now it was an earworm in her head. And that was the whole point of it, is have a bunch of earworms where people couldn't get rid of it. So, all right. So I want to talk about the truck. So
no, hold on, man. You just can't put that out there. And that there's so much in there. I mean, I love the fact that you're mostly trying to amuse yourself.
Yes.
And just letting the viewer come along for the ride.
True.
I love the fact that you're, using music to do it. I just think that's so. I mean, look, I write and record unsolicited jingles for most of my sponsors, and I don't know how they feel about it half the time because it's super weird.
It is
why,
weird.
Why would I do that?
Yeah.
Look, I got a piano right next to me. I'm always writing stuff, always recording stuff. I just did one for Manscaped. The guys that shave up your junk.
Yep. What are they called? The Manscaper 3.0 now, or something like that. Whatever version they're on.
lawn trimmer.
The lawn trimmer. That's right.
There. Wait, personally, it's not my bag. But, hey, man, they've been a good advertiser.
Yeah.
But I wrote, and I just recorded it in 4-part harmony. You can Google it and find it, but the melody goes. Your gonads are covered with curly black hair, fuzzy and furry, they're dangling there. Your scrotum needs trimming, but don't you despair. Manscaped is here so your balls can be bare. Now, come on, man.
It's beautiful.
Who doesn't want to live in a world where you can get away with writing that,
yes,
recording it in 4 parts, and blowing it out onto the interwebs? That's satisfying.
100%. Yeah, I'm not the music guy, but I'm the writer, so it's fun to put those things together and collaborate with somebody and come up with something. Our jingle, which I haven't played the intro for you. You know what? Damn it! They've heard this because I'm inserting it in the actual show, but I'm playing this for you because you just have to hear it. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. So we are going to let's see.
Hit me.
The Truck Show. We're gonna show you what we know. We're gonna answer what the truck, 'cause truck rhymes with The Truck Show. We have the lifted, we have the lowered, and everything in between. We'll talk about trucks that run on diesel and the ones that run on gasoline. The Truck Show, the Truck Show, the Truck Show. Oh, oh.
It's the Truck Show.
So you kind of get the idea, but it's funny because we have these listeners, and they're like, I was driving with the family, and we were listening to the Truck Show podcast, and my kid from the back seat says, Dad, I know what rhymes with truck. And we're thinking, oh, great. He goes, it's great. Duck, isn't it? We're like, yes, it's duck. But Nissan has been a sponsor of mine since the beginning, and they've been absolutely phenomenal to this show. And that was really edgy for a very conservative Japanese company, and they've never said anything about it. Ever in 420 episodes, so we roll with it. But the idea is have a good time. If you're not doing what you love, go do something else because life's too short to not be happy and having fun. Figure out how to make money doing what you love. That's it.
If you want perfect, you can find it. I mean, people are always in pursuit of it, but in general, in my world, production is the enemy of authenticity.
Yeah,
and.
Oh, great. This is a poorly produced show, so this is great.
No, I get it, man. I get it. But in the end, no amount or no lack of production ever impacted the relevance or the topicality or the importance of what's being said. It either elevates it or it gets in the way. Yeah. And in my experience, by and large, it gets in the way. Slick sucks.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that a lot of times when you're delivering the type of authentic message that I think you like to do for your audience, I like to do for mine, typically production weeds out or takes out some of the meat, and then the message doesn't feel as authentic. And so this show is highly not produced, other than we pride ourselves on good audio quality. Beyond that, it's a disaster most days, and our audience loves us for it. Okay, so what's not a disaster is the 1962 Dodge Power Wagon, so named Project Sweat. This thing is incredible. It's going to go up for auction at Barrett-Jackson, I believe, on the 26th, which is Saturday, January 26th, coming up. And they're talking about 3:30 or so Mountain Time. So if you're following Barrett, you want to check in for that. So I'll describe the truck, and then let's go through kind of how it came into play. It's basically a 1962 Dodge Power Wagon, which took 5 different Dodge trucks to make this one-off crew cab. Even has suicide doors, some of the specs. So it's I believe it's on a modern Ram chassis. It's a fully documented 1,000 horsepower 426 Hemi to the Elephant spec, and it's got a J1 Motorsports 3-liter IHI twin screw blower. It's backed by an 8-speed 8HP95 trans. It's 4-wheel drive. Has a Carly Dominator 3.0 suspension. It's on 18-inch Black Rhino Abrams wheels, 37-inch Toyo. So these are all companies that we deal with all the time. The interiors, our friends at TMI did the seats, and it has tan Apex leather with the TMI 2+2 seating, Dakota digital gauges, Pioneer sound system, Rustamod HVAC, modified AEV front bumper, another big group that we deal with all the time. It has this incredible flatbed, work bed, tray bed, however you want to talk about it, made by M&M Fabrication and the Mike Rowe Works Foundation badging throughout. 8,000 man hours are into this truck. I saw this truck at SEMA when I came looking for you, and spent a little bit of time with it. The craftsmanship, we're going back to artistry, we're going back to the conversation of craftsmanship. 8,000 man hours doesn't do justice the amount of work if you know what went into this truck and how flawless it is when you see it.
Thanks. Again, I'm in one of those situations where I really can't take credit for any of this. I'm just so humbled by the end result and so flattered by how it came to pass. And since you talked about the specs, I'll just give you the quick down low on what happened.
Yeah.
I was in Montana over a year ago when Colby Donaldson approached me at this event with the governor. Colby is a TV guy. He hosted a bunch of shows and kind of got on the radar after, I think, the first season of Survivor, which he nearly won. Anyway, he lives in Texas. He's on a ranch, and he's a designer, and he lives in this world. And he's a fan of the Mike Rowe Works Foundation. And he came up to me and said, I want to persuade the best people I know to make the best work truck ever, and then get Barrett-Jackson to auction it off. Can I have your permission to do that? and of course I said yes, knowing full well that it would never happen. People come to me every day, Sean. They got ideas, whatever. God bless them. But it very, very, very rarely comes to fruition, especially something this ambitious. Well, he knew John Richardson up at Sugar Creek, and approached them with the idea. And John was familiar with Mike Rowe Works and knew firsthand about the struggles of recruiting, especially in automotive, and said, yeah, let's do it. By the way, if your listeners don't know, Sugar Creek has made all the bacon you've ever eaten, right? They sell bacon to guys like Oscar Mayer and Smithfield and so forth. But John's real passion in life is automotive. And he has hundreds of old clunkers in what looks like a junkyard and a 10,000 square foot state-of-the-art garage with 27, 28 guys in it who live, eat, and breathe this stuff 24/7.
Awesome.
That's the team who put this thing together. I've heard it's closer to 11,000 man hours now.
I would see that.
It got totally out of hand, as these things do. It just completely consumed them. And I mean, it took the better part of a year. They're up in Washington Courthouse in Ohio. I went up to see that thing 4 months ago. Took my breath away. I went to SEMA to see it unveiled. Unbelievable. It's just the enthusiasm for the thing. And so, yeah, I'm going to go to Scottsdale. We're going to auction it off. 100% of the money is going to go to the MicroWorks Foundation. We'll use it for work ethic scholarships in our next round and help specifically train the next generation of skilled workers in the automotive industry with all of this. So it's a labor of love. And I just got fortunate enough to get caught up in the slipstream. And now we're going to see how much we can sell it for.
What do you think a good price is? Do you have any number in mind? I mean, do they have any number that they think is a goal?
Well, I'll tell you this. I know your listeners are familiar with Barrett Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
Craig.
We've had Craig on the show
he's
before.
Raised their charity auctions over the last 20 years or so have raised over $153 million.
Yeah.
For all sorts of causes. When you say a good price, obviously the more the better. I think the thing probably cost $500,000 to build, and you just never know with these things. You know, you get a bunch of gajillionaires in the audience. I mean, it's a tax deductible donation, and it's a one of a kind truck.
Yeah,
it wouldn't shock me to see it go well north of seven figures. Selfishly, I hope what happens is somebody, because you're not going to use this as a practical matter. Nobody's going to pay $2 million for a truck and fill it with lumber and then drive it through a concrete work site.
Sure.
I hope that I can maybe use it in the future in the course of other fundraisers. By the way, just so your audience knows, I do some super weird stuff to raise money for MicroWorks. Historically, I've auctioned off over $1 million worth of swag I've just taken from dirty jobs over the years. I mean, like fossilized polar bear crap and and baby bottles filled with semen I gathered from a thoroughbred, right? I mean, weird stuff. And we also get nice checks from big companies and people donate. But you know, the idea of these kinds of auctions, it's really good because it gets a lot of press and people get a chance to see it. And then in this case, it hits really close to home because those 8 million open positions I'm talking about are real. And right now, last I checked, the automotive industry as a group is coming up about 68,000 technicians short this year. It's going to be worse next year.
And it's only going to get worse.
Yeah. So, you know, the stars have aligned, hopefully, and, you know, we'll see what it goes for.
You know, we went from having mechanics to having parts replacers, and you know, we need more technicians, and as cars get more digital and all that, we need, you know, smart people who can diagnose issues with them. And a lot of the manufacturers are running kind of over their skis a little bit, getting stuff out because of regulations that maybe isn't quite ready for prime time. And then the onus is on the dealer to make them right. So you have to have those smart technicians. How does it make you feel that all of these people, this 11,000 estimated man hours in this truck, all this came about because somebody wanted to support a cause that you believe in, that you started, that has your name on it? That has to be pretty amazing.
Well, it's the exact point writ larger that we made earlier. You know, all you can do is your best, Sean. You can do the best podcast you can, and you throw it out there, and you're like a pitcher who lets go of the ball. It's now out of your hands. And what impact your words might have on your audience, it's just simply not up to you, you know? So I'm kind of philosophical about it. Like when I think back at moments like this, I didn't know Colby Donaldson was that big a fan of my foundation till he told me. And I didn't know that he knew John Richardson. And I didn't know that he was going to have 28 of these magical elves at his disposal who can create this thing out of thin air. And I didn't know that Craig Jackson was going to fly out there too and say hello and make this his cause. You know, you can't really take credit for any of that. All you can do is be grateful when it happens and understand that, you know, you have to remember who you work for at the end of the day. It's not Motor Trend for you. It never was.
No.
It's not Discovery for me. It never was. It's the people who listen to your show, read your work, watch your TV. It's the audience. It's always the audience. And so when I find out that Ernest Borgnine was in the audience and that Craig Jackson was in the audience and that these people who I've always admired are also at home on a Tuesday night with nothing to do, and they flick on the TV and they're there with me. That dude, that's a consummation devoutly to be wished. I wish it for everyone in some iteration.
And you know how it is. This is a one-way media. Social has made it two-way at times, but you put it out there, and sometimes you don't know what the response is. You're just doing it and throwing it into the well and hoping you hear an echo back every once in a while. And when somebody does bring something up, two funny things. I was in church. I'm an usher, so we're passing around the collection basket, and this guy whispers as I hand him the basket, goes, "Do you have a podcast?" And I looked at him. I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, I like it." That was weird. And then I was at SEMA, and you know how SEMA is. You go through and they're checking your bags, and there was a security officer, and he sees on my shirt, Truck Show Podcast. He goes, "Oh, dude, I love your podcast." And I'm thinking, no, this guy is just saying that because he recognizes that I have some outlet. And I go, "Oh, yeah, you listen?" Kind of challenging him a little bit. He goes, "Yeah, but I never heard what rhymed with truck." And I'm like, oh, he does listen, right? So there's those little funny moments in your everyday existence where, it's an idle Tuesday or something, or in the case of church Sunday, you're not even thinking about this stuff. It's your day job and you're going about your normal life. And somebody engages with you in a way that makes you go, oh, that's pretty cool. Somebody out in the world, appreciates what I'm doing. I'm gonna do that again this week. And that's pretty awesome. I'm going to ask you. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know. I was just going to bring it back to my mom.
Yeah.
I mean, her fourth book is called "Oh No, Not the Home," and she wrote a bunch of true stories about these crazy encounters that she's had in the retirement community where she and my dad live. And it's a big hit in general, but in that community where they live, literally everybody has read it, and there are like 2,000 people there. And now she can't even walk to lunch without somebody coming up to her with tears in their eyes with a book earmarked to the page where they're mentioned or where somebody they know is mentioned. And, it just goes to show that even when you're in your 90s, the hunger for that kind of connection, it's a bit like fishing, I mean, people who love to fish wouldn't fish if they never caught a fish. They just wouldn't do it. Some might. My mom wrote 60 years, before she got the kind of feedback that she now gets every 10 seconds.
Yeah.
But I don't care whether you're Dave Sprang, whether you're making trucks, whether you got a dirty job, whether you do a podcast, this thing we're talking about, and we'll see it at this auction too. That arena is going to be filled with like-minded people. And so it's just, I know we're making the same point over and over, but I would challenge your listeners to think about all that in the context of their day job and whatever it is they do, and what really makes you feel like you're moving the needle. What makes you feel like you gave a damn about the right thing.
Yeah.
When do those moments happen? Were you welding horseshoes as a kid to a wheel? What were you doing?
Yeah.
And it's only the stuff of life.
I'm going to ask you this question selfishly. If this is successful, will there be more truck builds in your future? Mostly because we want to have you back on the podcast.
Look, we don't have to wait for that. This was a lot of fun. I'll hop on anytime. Maybe you return the favor. If you're ever in LA, we'll do one in person.
I live here.
Fun to have you on mine.
Yeah, I'm in Orange County, so I would love to join you anytime.
All right. Well, look, I mean, I quit trying years ago to predict the future. I obviously don't have a crystal ball. Yes is the short answer, but I'm more interested in what's the corollary? It doesn't, like Lance Armstrong said, it's not about the bike. This is not about the truck. It's about the phone call I got a couple months ago from a company you've probably never heard of called Blue Forge Alliance. They represent something called the American Submarine Industrial Base, which consists of 15,000 individual companies who together are charged with delivering 4 nuclear-powered subs to the Navy, 2 Virginia, 2 Columbia class. They're hiring 100,000 tradespeople in the next 8 years, man.
Can I shout out to Captain Stephen Hux, who's a listener? He is, when I met him, third in command on an Ohio class, invited me out to Kings Bay, Georgia because of this podcast. I got to see the USS Tennessee in dry dock. I got to walk under it. He's like, you're one of the few people that has ever been under a boomer. Got a full tour of it except for the reactor. But he's like, put your hand on that wall. You're 20 feet from the reactor. You'll never be that close in your life to a reactor ever again. He just got his new command, and he's going to be going out on one of the 688 Los Angeles class submarines and bringing one that's been in dry dock and get it ready for sea trials. But he has been a listener, but has turned into a really good friend. So when you mention the submarine, by the way, submariner, not submariner. So all of our submariners will appreciate me calling that out. I just want to shout him out because it's guys like him that I want to acknowledge. I sent care packages back in the day, boxes, shirts, license plate, whatever. And the reason they invited me out is they said, especially on the boomers, they're underwater for, months at a time. They don't get ports of call like the rest of the Navy. The reason we love the podcast and these magazines is we listen and entertain ourselves with whatever we bring on board. And I may have been told that some of the Truck Show podcast stickers are prowling the deep waters of the world, and that when that particular submarine, I won't tell you which one it went on because I don't want anyone looking for it, when that submarine gets retired, they will wonder how certain stickers got to where they are. So I can tell you that the Truck Show podcast supports the Navy and submariners, and we have stickers underwater that I hope at some point somebody is curious how the hell they got to where they are.
What's your buddy's name?
Stephen Hux.
Give my regards, man. That's great. They build those things vertically?
It's the whole process is, I've seen one out of water. I mean, it's
insane. They're longer than the Washington Monument is tall.
Yeah.
And they build them standing straight up. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I mean, so this group, they got to hire 100,000 tradespeople to make good on a contract that is now like the pointy part of the stick regarding national security. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not aircraft carriers anymore.
No,
they're critical.
Submarines. Yeah.
But it's subs.
It's subs, and we did a bad thing by shutting down a lot of our naval shipyards, so we don't have the capacity we once did, and that's a whole other topic we could get into. But before we go, can we toast?
Yeah, sure, man.
All right, let me grab a glass here.
Yeah, we're really not to the point where we're just going to drink it out of the bottle, are we?
Well, I could, but I mean, what the hell, right?
What you got there is barrel strength.
Yep.
So go easy.
119 and a half proof.
Mine's 121. God, that's pretty douchey. Mine's autographed. I don't know. I typically don't sign my own bottles. I just had a couple left over, and this is the one I grabbed onto.
And I've got this cool shot glass that has a round in it. So, there you go.
Well, I'm drinking it out of an Ember coffee mug, so I got to go quick because it's getting warm.
All right. So here we go. A little 1, 2, 3. Cheers to Mike Rowe and the Mike Rowe Works Foundation.
Cheers. And to your podcast, The Truck Show, which rhymes with,
I love it. So good.
I'm glad you like it. I like it too.
Hold on, barrel strength. I should tell you about the time they took barrel strength, tried to light my cigar with it. Almost caught my beard on fire, but that's another story. All right. If you don't already, please subscribe to The Way I Heard It. It's hands down one of the best podcasts. As Mike says, it's for the curious mind with the short attention span, which will fit most of us. It's the opposite of this show. The format's awesome, and it's micro storytelling, so you can't get much better than that. Also, follow Peggy Rowe, Mike's mom, on social. If you don't do that, she's hilarious. You'll get a kick out of it. She's amazing. And then please visit and consider donating to Mike Rowe Works. Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. I really do hope we can do it again and crack open a bottle of Noble together. I would love to have another one with you.
Deal. And for those watching, this is her first book about my mother, New York Times bestseller. Second book, about your father.
That one is
and other
hilarious.
celebrities.
That's a great book, by the way.
Laugh out loud funny. This is even funnier. Vacuuming in the nude and other ways to get attention. That freaked people out. And this is Oh No, Not the Home.
I love your parents. Please give them my regards because they're amazing. And I'm glad that you've shared them with us.
Hey, man, I appreciate you bringing them up. Thanks for writing your own jingles and doing a weird little show. You're welcome on mine anytime.
All right. Well, we'd love to make that happen. And let's stay in touch.
Adios.
So how about that Mike Rowe, huh? Figured you guys were going to love that. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed having that time with him. And hopefully he'll be back. Hopefully you enjoyed it as well. And I can still hear that guy in the back. He loves everything podcast. All right. Sit down. All right, I know some of you are thinking probably the same thing I am, and that is, I can't believe he had Mike Rowe on Season 3, Episode 1. What a high bar. What are you going to do to top it? And to be honest with you guys, I have no idea. So why don't we just chalk this one up to a win? And if you stick around, let's just say it'll give you a taste of what's in store for the Truck Show Podcast for 2025, and we're happy to have you. Well, on that note, I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Truck Show Podcast, and I want your feedback, so please shoot us an email at truckshowpodcast@gmail.com, truckshowpodcast@gmail.com.
The Truck Show, the Truck Show, the Truck Show, oh, oh.
And don't forget, you can also leave us a voicemail. Be a part of the show. Tell us what's on your mind. 657-205-6105. That's the 5-star hotline. And I just changed the message for the first time in 6 years, and you don't have to wait as long to get to the beep. So hopefully, if that was keeping you guys from leaving messages, you can leave a new one now. And we'd be happy to hear from you. Follow us on social at Truck Show Podcast, at Sean P. Holman. And please send me your events. We want to get the events page current. So if you've got an event in your neck of the woods, you'd like to have a free promotion, then we will put it up on the events calendar on truckshowpodcast.com. And don't forget, if you're on Facebook, please join our private group for the Truck Show Podcast, the Podshed Insiders. This is going to be the place where I interact with you guys and you interact with each other. And we share ideas, and you get to be the first to know. So if we're going to do a live show, things like that, we're going to share all the news through the Podshed Insiders, and I think it'll be a cool thing. So before we go, we got to thank our sponsors. If you're in the market for a new truck or SUV, you got to go over to NissanUSA.com. Nissan is the presenting sponsor of the Truck Show Podcast, and they have been absolutely phenomenal to the show. Got to thank our friends over at AMSOIL. AMSOIL, the first in synthetics. They make the best lubricants for your ride. Also, some of the best truck accessories out there. EGR USA. You can go to EGRUSA.com and you can check out products like the amazing Roll Track tonneau cover, but they have so much more there. And how about that 40% off MSRP and free shipping over $50 if you go to Kershaw.kaiusa.com. So Kershaw Knives is our latest sponsor of the Truck Show Podcast, and they want a Kershaw knife in your pocket. 40% off. So I just wanted to say one last thing. Again, Happy New Year. Really appreciate you guys sticking with me for all these years. And, of course, going into 2025, going to do my best to have a lot of great shows. And we're looking forward to one hell of a 2025 together. So that does it for now. We'll see you on the next show. And thanks, everybody.
It's a weird little show. I like it, too.
The Truck Show Podcast is a production of Truck Famous LLC. This podcast was created by Sean Holman and Jay Tillis, hosted by Sean Holman, and uses production elements by DJ Omar Khan and Jay Tillis. If you like what you've heard, please open your Apple Podcast or Spotify app and leave us a 5-star review. And if you're a fan, there's no better way to support the show than by sharing it and patronizing our sponsors. Some vehicles may have been harmed during the making of this podcast.